Hi, I'm Madonna Guy, and you're here with The Natural Alternative. Welcome. I'm here today with my guest, Pamela Wirth. How are you, Pamela?
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Madonna. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So, today we're going to talk about all sorts of natural products that can help little human beings on the planet and just about anyone. Can you tell us how you got into this area?
Yeah, for sure. So it was some really serious and misdiagnosis of one of my children that really led me on this journey. When someone tells you that they've got OCD or Tourette's or autism or autoimmune, all of a sudden you start to, and my background is running and building companies and problem solving, and so I don't take anything lightly. I really want to get to the bottom of what's going on. And so it really led me on this journey to find a doctor that would be willing to pull blood work and find out what else could potentially be happening. And it's been a really, really interesting journey, over a decade now, and one that thankfully ended happily. I've got two healthy teenagers, but not necessarily something that I would have thought at any point would have turned out okay. It was really scary. Um, and it's pretty interesting now as we start to examine more and more about how the gut's driving brain behavior and how vitamin levels, genetic levels, and the presence of any infections can really make a huge difference in your health and wellness.
Absolutely. I was listening to a podcast just a couple of days ago about parasites. And of course, I treat ADHD and autism and all sorts of things as well. And parasites has always been high on the list of things that uh, can affect the brain. And this particular thing that this guy said, which I had not heard before, is that parasites will use absolutely anything as their food source. So because we make most of the neurotransmitters in our gut, parasites will actually eat the neurotransmitters, so they're not left over for the brain. So it really affects that. Anyway, that was just a little thing about parasites.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And I'm not really sure that there's much in terms of testing that goes on with folks when it comes to parasites, unless you really, really have a huge gut problem and then they start digging into it. But it's not something that's front of brain for sure.
No, absolutely not. And since I've been using a bioresonance in my clinic for about 13 months, and all of a sudden it once again put it to the forefront of my brain, because a lot, especially around full moon, what a surprise, especially around full moon, a lot of people have all of these parasites show up because at the full moon they actually grow, they create a lot of eggs. So, and there's often, especially with people with long-term health issues, they often have, say, 6 to 12 parasites showing up in their system, different varieties. So working on that gut health is so important.
Yeah, that's terrible. Well, good. Looking forward to digging into how we help folks gut health for sure.
So are you happy to chat about the actual diagnosis that your child had?
Yeah, no, for sure. It ended up being a brain autoimmune disorder. So what had happened was he had low vitamin D3, low B12, genetic marker MTHFR. He had an active viral infection called CMV,
Yes.
and then he had high strep titers. Even though he was negative for strep throat, he had high strep titers in his blood. So that would have totally gone undiagnosed and would have really ravaged his body for many, many years to come. So anyway, all these things together, his immune system wasn't working properly. It was just too much. And the infection crossed the blood-brain barrier and started causing motor, vocal, and mood disorder. But as you're going through that, kind of like Lyme, it affects so many things that is really, really hard to pinpoint what's going on unless you can run a bunch of tests and find out, all these little puzzle pieces, what needs to be fixed, one at a time or simultaneously, because it's just not just one thing.
Absolutely. And I did see a study a few years ago, and obviously he wasn't, your son?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't diagnosed autism, but I sort of study with autism, and it was from the States, and they were looking at little kids between 2 and 17 who happened to die
Mm.
before that age, and they all had autism. So they did some biopsies of their brain. So they basically did slicing and found out what was going on. One of the things that they found, you mentioned strep and the high strep titers, staph and strep was found in every single basal ganglia in those children. Now, it was only a very, very small sample, like it was less than 20 kids, I think, or maybe it was 30, but it wasn't a lot. But nonetheless, they all had that going on in the basal ganglia of the brain. So, and doctors still say to this day that infections don't cross the blood-brain barrier, that vaccine toxins don't cross the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah, they
So
do.
they're not paying attention. They're not paying attention.
Yeah, thankfully there's more and more research coming out, but it's still a long road ahead.
Absolutely. So what did you start doing with him? So once you
Well,
found all of these things going on in his little body,
yeah. So, you know, I'm not one of these people that is overly patient. And so I didn't want to do one thing at a time. I really wanted to say, okay, so what do we have? And then let's start hitting, each thing simultaneously the best that we can. And then pulling blood work repeatedly quarterly to make sure that we're going in the right direction. So
nice.
started implementing uh, 15 different probiotics that are good for the gut brain axis, 2 prebiotics that prevent negative overgrowth of bacteria, vitamin D3, methylfolate. He also was low in B12, so we added some methylated B12. Let's see here. Started him on an antiviral for about a week or two, just to kind of help his system get a kickstart. We did put him on different types of antibiotics, and then we ended up pulling his tonsils too. Even though his tonsils were normal looking, strep likes to hide there, and we just were really struggling to get those titers down. But when we did get the titers down, then we never had a problem with his health and wellness again. So it definitely made a huge impact for him to hit those things.
Awesome. So how has he moved forward? Like he's just a normal, healthy, happy kid these days?
Yep, straight A student, elite athlete. He's doing great.
Wow, his brain's working. What a concept. So, and your other child you mentioned too? So your other child never had any issues?
No, but he had ADD really bad, and he's super smart. So kind of your twice exceptional. And it was interesting when I started treating him with some of these things that I was treating the other son with. His ADD got better. So there's definitely something connected with the gut and ADD as well.
Okay. So it was prebiotics and probiotics, vitamin D. What else was there?
Methylfolate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. The old MTHFR gene. Absolutely.
Yeah. Olive leaf extract for
Yeah.
viral, oregano for bacteria, cinnamon for fungus, sunflower phosphacetylserine to kind of help you sleep, as well as it helps with ADD, turmeric, um, omegas,
Right.
anti calming the
And they're
system.
the sort of supplements that you've put together now.
Yes.
Wow, what a journey you've had.
Yeah, I certainly have. It's been a wild ride and very fulfilling at the same time. I've gotten some pretty incredible testimonials from folks that are very thankful that we went down this road.
Awesome. Are there any that you're happy to share?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of testimonials on our website, and then I'm happy to share as many as I can as well. Um, in particular, we've got one child that was nonverbal. He's now saying a few words, so that's super. We've got folks that are talking about more energy, more focus, sleeping better. And so that's been and skin, a lot of that is bacterial by nature. And so when you clean up the gut, you're cleaning up the skin as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and I often talk to people about the leaky gut. So if we've got leaky gut, and then we've got weak lungs, we can have leaky gut, leaky lungs, and you end up with asthma or bronchitis. If you've got weak skin, then it's leaky gut, leaky skin. So dermatitis, eczema, psoriasis, that sort of thing, but also the brain, leaky gut, leaky brain. So it really depends on where our weakness is in the body or where whatever's happened, that's actually, was there an injury with your son, or was it very much along the lines of, was it a birthing injury? Was there a vaccine injury? Was there anything? No?
Nope. Because he was 5.5, 6 years old. So I can't blame anything like that.
Yeah.
What I can do is remember the day that he got really sick. And I think it was the virus that he caught, the CMV virus. It made him really ill. But it's a pretty common virus. And so
It's
I think
a
it
very
was
common virus. Yes.
that along with, I was caving like any other mom to too many carbs, too much sugar. And so, as part of all this, we really started limiting simple carbs and sugars as well, and really started putting a big emphasis on organic chicken breasts and ground turkey, and making sure that we're really eating better fruits and vegetables and protein, and making smoothies whenever necessary in order to get some of that stuff down.
Yeah. And do you find that if your diet lapses for a week or two, say on holidays, how do you find your health goes? Because obviously you're living this healthy lifestyle. How do you find the health of you or any of your kids go when you do lapse for a few weeks?
Um, they're fine. Because they've just kind of learned to be a little bit more regimented. For me personally, I tend to feel more sluggish. I may or may not sleep as well. I may or may not be able to focus or remember things quite as sharply. You just feel kind of bloated and lethargic, and it's eating too much pizza or drinking too much beer. Can really take a toll on your system. So
Yeah. There's a Dr. Jeffrey Bland, who I've been following for about 20 years, and he once said that if you have one inflammatory meal and then don't do something to calm it down, it can continue creating inflammation in your body for up to 42 days.
yeah,
Which is just phenomenal, So some people, they go on holidays and they just feel crap, moving forward. They just don't feel better.
yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I do find that when I take plants and herbs that are anti-inflammatory in nature, like the turmeric, the boswellia, the olive leaf extract, the oregano, the omegas, that really helps kind of. I don't feel the same sharp feelings of poor health as I once did. I think it's just trying to keep the system in check is important. I think a lot of
Absolutely.
times, I think a lot of times we tend to focus on health and wellness when we feel bad, but you still got to put your body on maintenance. So
You do, absolutely. And so many people, exactly as we would always say, people are willing to put the money into their car. They're willing to
mhm.
put the money into their house, but they don't spend the money on their health to keep them healthy moving forwards.
Yeah, and I've had folks tell me more than once, I can't afford to buy all these supplements and whatever. And I was like, if when I go back and I take a look at the medical bills that we had spent, versus what we now spend on supplements and making sure that we're eating right, it's still a savings. Um,
Exactly. And I even look at things like, how often do you need the chiropractor or a massage, or could you potentially do it because you're in pain all the time? People don't
mhm,
take into account all of those things, or the fact that they're back at their doctor every week or two. They're back at
yeah,
their specialist every 3 months. Here in Australia, a visit to the specialist is often $300-400, and you're getting 10 minutes. So, and then quite often they come to me and I give them an hour and they say, well, I don't know why my specialist never told me that. And you go, well, they're not trained in health.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So you had to be really vigilant going out there and finding the answers for your son. By the sound of it, it didn't come easily.
No, it didn't at all. And I did, and it was frankly kind of scary. I leaned pretty heavy into private Facebook groups and just really kind of poured my heart out. And thankfully, found some really really nice people. I do worry a lot about that now, with knowing what I now know a decade later about data. And so, one of the things that I do want to build out is a safe place for folks to connect with each other. Because without that connection with other people going through it or having been through it, or brainstorming, hey, what does this mean, what can I do next, you feel alone, you feel depressed. It's terrible.
So are you creating that sort of space for people?
Yeah, yeah, so it's meant to be a place where folks can not only connect with each other, but then practitioners that are more integrative in nature can put themselves out there, so it's almost like a LinkedIn for integrative health.
Okay, right. So that's great. And you've written a book.
Yeah, I did. Hello Health, and then my second book is coming out shortly, called Saving My Son.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Was
just got
that
a lot of research. Sorry.
was that cathartic, writing that book?
It was good for me. It helped me a lot. My husband didn't really understand why I was doing it or why I would even do that. It's just, but for me, I kind of took this as I feel like this happened to us for a reason. And I'm one of these people that can make things happen. And so I felt like, it happened to me on purpose. And it was now my journey to kind of help lead others through it so they can hopefully avoid any of this, or a
Yeah.
lot of it.
So many children are suffering. Here in Australia, about 1 in 8 kids is asthmatic, about 1 in 12 is ADHD. We're getting to about 1 in 50 with autism. We're sort of like, our levels are just getting to allergies is 1 in 6. So
Hmm.
we've just got this crazy ill health going on with our children. And occasionally, when they do finally do a study, a few years ago, they did one with allergies with children where all they did was a probiotic, which was the rhamnosus strain, I think. and they used it in combination with the tiniest amount of the allergen. And then they would do that. I think they did it over 2 years. And of course, what ended up happening was like 90% of these kids weren't allergic to the same thing 2 years later, because that actually worked on the gut. And bit by bit, they regrew the little villi in the intestines. And these parents were all pro health, because otherwise they wouldn't have been in part of a program that used probiotics, because that's not a pharmaceutical. And it was an amazing study that was really quite very easily, well, not that easily, but some people end up with these allergies for the rest of their life.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. And in the States, 1 in every 5 kids and adults are being diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder now. So it's just really, really
1 in
alarming.
8 in Australia. Maybe that has changed. I've been saying 1 in 8, but 1 in 5, that's phenomenal.
No, it's terrible. And then now they're saying, because there's so many disorders that branch off of autism, now they're saying it's 1 in every 35 kids.
Yeah.
I just feel like they keep adding a name to a symptom to give it a diagnosis code so they can put a drug to it. And
Absolutely.
I feel like it's a nasty spiral.
And when you go back to the body, to an individual cell,
yeah,
every cell needs to take in nutrients and get out waste products, and then our body needs to expel the toxins. If we can do that on a daily basis, we're going to improve our health.
Yeah, and it's insanely difficult to find someone. I just met with someone in Arizona today, thankfully, but it's insanely difficult to find somebody that is an MD that can actually write for real medicine, but also is integrative in nature and or certified in certain things like Ayurvedic or integrative health or functional medicine, or things that you really want to examine all the different parts and run blood work or saliva work or urine work and see what's really going on. So it's just there's so much more than just a simple test to find out what's really going on with somebody. And then you really can't determine that in 15 minutes. So
no, absolutely not. And I know different states in America have got different rules medically. I remember hearing something on thyroid about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. One of the states, and I can't remember which state it was, if you happen to have a Down syndrome child, the TSH was allowed to be as high as 30 before they would do anything about it. So there was this one particular little girl who was the story that I heard about, and she was this little dynamo, and then around 2 years old, her energy went as flat as anything, and she just wasn't her normal self. So then it took ages for these parents, because they knew her personality had changed. They knew it, and they kept getting everything checked, and everything was showing up normal, until they finally found out that there were actually different parameters because their daughter was Down syndrome. So sometimes doctors, if it doesn't show up red, you get here in Australia, you get your blood test back, and unless it's bright red, the doctor doesn't even look at it, and they go, oh, gee, the GGT is a bit high, or, they'll look at something, but, they're so busy, they're simply not paying attention a lot of the time.
For sure. So in your practice and what you do, what are some of the things that you like to say, hey, here's where we're going to start, or here's how we're going to take a look at you, or what do you like?
Absolutely. So with any child, for example, like vitamin D is one of my favorites. Like that is an easy thing to get tested. Here in Australia, naturopaths like it, so they've made it $50 extra, so they can get a free blood test from the doctor, except for vitamin D, so, but we know that if someone's under 50 here in Australia, nanomoles per milliliter, then that's way too low. We need it, especially with autoimmunity. And I don't know whether you've got the same parameters in the States, but it needs to be up over 100. We need to have double what they're saying. We've got to remember that the recommended daily allowances of things were based on healthy 25-year-olds doing absolutely nothing in hospital rooms, and they were checking the base levels of nutrition that they need. It was not based on ill health. It was based on healthy, functional 25-year-olds. So if I've got an autoimmune disease, what he needed, 20 years ago that they said was a, important level to have, that's nothing to do with anything. So, yeah, the gut is hugely important. I always look at the symptoms associated with the detoxification systems. So how acidic is the body? If the body is too acidic, so we're eating too many grains, too much sugar, too much alcohol, too much red meat in combination with grains and things, not enough greens, not enough purified water, then someone's going to be acidic. The more stressed they are, the more acidic they are. The more overweight we are, the more acidic we are. So many things make our bodies more acidic. And you've got plant-based products, and it's sort of anything that supports detoxification of the liver, of the kidneys, of the lymph, of the blood supply, of the skin, is going to support the body in improving long term. So I look at acid levels first, and then I go to the gut. And, the sort of thing I often say is, well, are you bloated, burping, belching, wind, flatulence, diarrhea, constipation? And quite often people will have 2 or 3 of those and they just consider it normal. I had a little old lady years ago, she was about 80, and her son-in-law was a doctor, and she was pooping once per week. And he told her that that's normal for her, so it was okay. I know. But it wasn't okay for her because she was complaining about it. So she came to see me, and I can't even remember what we got her on. It's something that isn't available now, I think. But we basically got things moving. And we are meant to go to the toilet as often as we eat. That's what nature designs us to do. So because the valve in underneath our stomach works in tandem with the valve 8 inches from the rectum. So basically those two are supposed to open and close at the same time. So if we eat, the other valve is going to get activated and want to go to the toilet. But society doesn't really allow that. Like, what do kids do in school? They're told they must sit still for this amount of time. Then they can quickly go to the toilet. They must sit still. So we're training ourselves not to pay attention to our bodies. And how many, and I heard someone said yes, and I'm sure this was an exaggeration, but by the time people are 60 in America, the average number of prescriptions is between 10 and 20. Does that feel right to you?
I know there's a lot of folks that are on a lot of them.
Right.
I tend to try not to associate with folks that believe in 10 or 20 is okay. But, there are folks that take a lot of prescriptions.
Yeah.
And strangely, they're very cheap when combined with insurance.
Oh, absolutely.
Certainly not. So,
and I totally get that. We spend a huge percentage of our GDP on pharmaceutical drugs here in Australia. So people like my stepdad, he can get all of his drugs for like $50 or something a month, and you get a bottle of, say, a good quality fish oil, that is going to cost you $120. I go, oh my gosh, I can't possibly spend that amount of money. Go, but this will help your brain. This will help your cells. This will help your liver. This will help your gut.
And then you won't have all the side effects either.
Exactly. And that's the thing about the side effects. One of the things that Dr. Rima Labo said in a podcast earlier this week was that her first day in med school, she was there. She was the only woman, of course, 1966, and it was very challenging for her to get into med school. And the dude up the front said, men, drugs work in one way and one way only. They destroy enzyme systems in your body. If we like what they are doing, we call it a benefit. If we don't like what it is called, we call it a side effect. And I thought, interesting. And she said, and I put up my little hand and said, but sir, aren't enzymes the stuff of life? How do we go if we're poisoning enzyme systems on a daily basis?
Right.
And she, of course, was told not to think about that sort of thing. But very interesting. And I don't know whether that's true, but it was an interesting comment, 55 years ago.
Yeah.
And I haven't looked into Big Pharma that much that, generally I try to avoid it like the plague as well. My brother's a GP and my cousin's an anaesthetist. So we have doctors in the family that I try not to have discussions with too often about anything about health, because it's a whole different world. It's a whole different paradigm.
Yeah, it really is.
And with the people, so is it mainly children that your supplements are for?
No, it's for kids and adults. And so what we find is that, and so the idea was that I was trying to make it cost effective for families, because you shouldn't have to go buy 4 different bottles of probiotics and 4 different bottles of omegas and whatever else. Yes. So, But what I do find is most people would never give it to their child without taking it first. Totally agree. And I run the same philosophy in my house. Now, so then that's where you get folks that are adults saying things like, oh, wow, my skin, it looks like I'm using fillers. It looks like I'm using Botox. It's like all these things because your body just looks and feels so much better when you're taking care of your gut. Because really, the point of the products that I put out there are brain, belly, and gut,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
immune, brain, belly, and immune. So the three of them work together like a triangle, and when all three are working, you feel great.
Yeah. And it is interesting. You mentioned oregano as one of your herbs that you use, and it's actually anti-parasitic as well. And
Oh,
there's another old doctor. She's gone now. Dr. Hilda Hem, I think her name is, but she wrote a book many years ago, and you wouldn't get away with writing this book these days, but it was like the cure for all disease.
mm,
And it was all about parasites. And as a doctor, she found that just about every person, whether it was arthritis or heart disease or brain issues or gut issues or IBS or whatever it was, if you started dealing with the parasites, you're going to start getting better health.
mm,
So
interesting.
many, because I do kinesiology as well, and so many clients do muscle test up as, like, say, a 6, 7, 8 day parasite cleanse per month. You start one day before the full moon, and
Mm,
then you go for another 5, 6, 7 days afterwards, and you just sort of get a really good anti-parasitic, but you do about twice what it says on the bottle. So
okay.
most anti-parasitics will work, but and what it does is just takes down the layer of what's going on in our gut.
Mm,
And
that's
exactly
actually
like you said, it's hard to
fascinating.
test for those things, and we can send away for parasite tests here in Australia, but it's about $400 to $600 a pop again. Whereas once again, if we've got any health issues, it can't hurt but helping your gut. And they're the same herbs that are going to support so many gut things. Like you
Yeah.
said, you use oregano for bacteria, whereas
Mhm.
I think of it as an anti-parasitic. So, but it does the same thing. It's all about improving that microbiome in the gut.
So what are some of your favorite supplement ingredients? What do you like? Your
Oh,
kind of use.
you mentioned phosphatidylserine earlier on. I just remember when we used to have a product that I thought it was expensive going back 20 years ago, and it
Yeah.
retailed about $100 for, say, 200 grams. So in
Mm,
hindsight, that is so cheap for phosphatidylserine because it's
yeah,
a really expensive nutrient.
it
So, well,
is.
it's expensive the way, it's when it's in fish oil combos here in Australia, you're probably once again paying about $95 for 100 mils. But I
Mm,
love it. And so many children, with that combination of EPA, DHA, and phosphatidylserine, their brains just feel alive and switched on. We
yeah.
don't want to send kids off to school when they're not enjoying it and when they're bummed and when they're not engaged. That's just not a way to spend 12 years.
Yeah, that's true. And what's interesting too is the bioavailability. And so there's a lot of supplements that include black pepper biopurine, but that really isn't great for folks with autoimmune and autism. Yes, it makes the ingredient more bioavailable, but what we try and do is add things like omega oils instead, because that also allows it to be bioavailable without upsetting the gut. Um, but I did recently introduce a product with biopurine just because that's what people expect and that's what they think they know, and the education process is so long.
Yes.
um but anyway, it's just kind of a funny side note.
No, no, absolutely. And just about the omegas as well. There was a good study that was released 3 or 4 years ago, and they were looking at the omega index. So the
Mhm.
amount of omega 3s in the cell membranes. And what
Mhm.
they found on average was that people who were vegan had an index of less than 2. People who were sort of vaguely making an effort to take supplements here and there generally would have it about 3 or 4. But the people with really good health would have an omega 3 index of about 8.
Hmm.
And the blue zones, you've heard of the blue zones around the world? Yeah. So the blue zones generally have a high omega 3 index in their cell membranes.
Hmm.
And funnily enough, you do wonder what the medical system's wanting with our health. You just wonder sometimes. So our Australian Heart Association, before that study came out, they used to recommend 2 pieces of oily fish per week. So, fair enough. after that study came out, they changed their recommendation to one piece and they removed the word oily. It was so bizarre. The studies proved that what they'd been recommending for ages was actually a good thing, and they made it stupid. And to this day, they have taken it out. So anyway, just bizarre. So I'm like you. I love the fish oils. I love the phosphatidylserine. I love the omegas. I think they're just amazing for just about everything, because if you get that cell wall, which is a double fatty lipid layer, and you get it working well, and you're taking in nutrients and releasing waste products, then you're going to have better health. And the challenge is the last couple of years, I do live blood screening as well, so HemOView, and whether it's the stress associated with everything, whether it's, whatever's going on, people's blood is stickier than ever before. And the omegas are one of the things that helps that. So when you've got really good omega-3s on your cell membranes, your cells start to repel each other. So in live blood screening, they're supposed to go around the body separately, but they can get sticky and, be like a row of coins on top of each other instead, and that's called rouleau. And if you've got rouleau in your bloodstream, once again, you're not getting nutrients in, you're not getting waste products out, and the zeta potential on your cell membrane has been damaged. So omegas are amazing.
That's good. I like that. Yeah.
And I'm like you, I love the turmeric, the curcuminoids. I think they're amazing, and there's thousands of studies now, thousands, so all you have to do is Google, and because we've got so many genes that are affected in a positive way by turmeric and the curcuminoids, it is just really quite one of those things that if people, I can't remember a person who can't take it. It's very well tolerated by most people. I think that's true. No one comes to mind.
No, I haven't found one that can't.
Yeah. And you're right about the black pepper. That's not because it's in the nightshade. It's not in the nightshade family, is it? Black pepper?
No.
I did have one lady, she taught me that goji berries were part of the nightshade family for inflammation. And she'd been going to this little coffee shop. She started getting autoimmune diseases around 10 years ago. And the first thing she did was took out dairy. So she was a size 14 at the time. She started Googling. She found that dairy has all these allergens in. So for her, she went, okay, I'll give that a try, because she had 3 autoimmune diseases to diagnose within 1 year. Because once again, when we get an autoimmune disease, it doesn't tend to stop with one. Once you've got that imbalance with the immune system, it's just waiting there for the immune system to attack the next organ. So you've really got to look at that underneath, which is why I love what you do. So she went down from a size 14 to a size 12 within the first 6 weeks just by removing dairy. So it was obviously inflammatory to her. Then she did some more Googling, and she found, because it wasn't so easy back then to have, chats online. And then she took out gluten the second month or the third month. And then she went down to a size 10. And she's a tall, cheeky babe, like 6 foot or something. But now she's a size 10. She's long and lean and has been ever since. But it's been a really long journey for her to work out which autoimmune diseases, she pays attention to her body. The second she has any little symptoms, she sort of goes, oh, what did I eat? And then she'll up her supplements, like her turmerics and her, quercetins and things. And she's got some really nice things that she takes. So she was at a little coffee shop just recently. She's having her usual little weird coffee combination that she has that has all the non-allergenic things in it. And there was this lovely sprinkle on top that she thought might have been rose petals or something. And as soon as she started, like literally within the first mouthful or the first 2 mouthfuls, she thought, oh, and she sort of felt her fingers, so she's quite a sensitive sweetie. By the time she got home, her whole hand was swollen. And it was her right hand, and that's where she's also had shingles and, all sorts of things. Anyway, she thought, right. And then the next time she went back to the shop and she said to her hubby, it must have been the stuff they put on top. And she's been going there for years. And the next time she went in there, the woman went to put the sprinkle on. She said, no, what is that? Oh, no, maybe she put it on, and she actually scraped it off immediately and whacked it on her husband's coffee. But she still had a tiny little thing in her hand. So it was the third time she went along, and she found out it was crushed goji berries, like powdered goji berries. And then she started Googling, and it was part of the nightshade family. So the normal list you hear of inflammatory foods, you know, your tomato, capsicum, eggplant, potato, tobacco, you know, there's, what a surprise, goji's in there. And I thought, oh my goodness, I would never have known that otherwise.
No, I wouldn't either. That's wild.
And that's why we sort of need to pay attention. You know, once we start, especially when you start feeling well,
Yeah,
and then when something goes on, have a think, you know, what could it have been, you know, and then have an experiment with it.
for sure.
So what other sort of supplements do you have?
We have organic sea moss with bladderwrack and burdock. So that's been really interesting. Sea moss has
So for the
92.
thyroid?
Well, for thyroid, for lowering blood sugar, sea moss naturally has 92 micronutrients, trace minerals, whereas the body has 102. So it's got a lot of those already in it. And then some people really like it for weight loss. So that's kind of been interesting. Um, Obviously, we've got vitamin B12, we've got resveratrol.
And the B12's methylated, you know, it's good for,
Yep.
I assume. Yeah.
Yep. We're bringing out an entire liquid line here in the next month or so. So we've had a lot of people asking for liquids. You know, it's funny because when I was first building this out, you know, a lot of people said you ought to do gummies. And I was like, no, I don't want to do gummies. It's a bunch of sugar. It's counterintuitive. And to get the right payload of nutrients, you have to take so many gummies. And so it's really cost prohibitive and not good for you. It's just not a good idea. So, and then folks said, why don't you do liquid? And I was like, well, I don't want to have to travel with liquids. I don't want to have to rely on whether or not I'm doing the right dosage. Anyway, I ended up finding heat resistant vegetarian capsules and then bioavailable plants in powder form. And the idea there was that, you know, you don't have to worry about it as perfectly measured. You can open it and put it in food or drink if you don't feel like swallowing a capsule. And so, but anyway, there's still a lot of demand for liquid from folks that are our customers. And so we're going to go ahead and roll that out because they want to.
Excellent. So what sort of sizes? Is that going to be 100 mils, 200 mils, 500 mils?
You know, being American, I can't do math. And so it's a 2-ounce bottle.
That's 120 mils, I think.
Okay.
Okay. That's a guess. I can't do American either. But I remember I started a product a little while ago where so my measuring cups are about 30 mils.
Nice.
And I think that's 1 ounce.
Okay.
I think. So yeah.
That's good. Yeah. So I think, you know, I think that'll be pretty good. A lot of folks are asking for more vegan products. And so even though our fish is really clean and comes from the North Atlantic, taking a look at some vegan omega options.
Yeah, they're always more expensive. It's and the absorption isn't so great. You know, it's a real challenge.
I know. So really spending a lot of time on that. So
yeah. A few years ago, I used to have a machine, a bioimpedance machine, which actually showed the fat mass, muscle mass, hydration, cellular quality in the body. And just recently it died, and you just can't get them in Australia anymore. No one's supporting that technology anymore here in Australia. So I'll have to source one from elsewhere. But it was sort of one of the things that I would often find, because I was a vegetarian for 20 years and I could never get my weight under control. And I'm overweight at the moment, but, you know, lots of stories there. And it's my fault, totally my fault, 100%. But when I was vegetarian, I was doing my bioimpedance screening regularly. I was always skinny fat. So you've heard of sarcopenia. So sarcopenia is the skinny fat thing. So you might be about the right weight, but you're over in fat mass and under in muscle mass. And regularly I find this in poor vegans and vegetarians who just can't make that muscle mass out of their protein. And it's a real challenge. Like there's a whole science to be a healthy vegan, and it's not easy.
Well, and you know, there's a lot of processed food for those that are vegetarian and vegan, and I'm not sure that a lot of those are as good for you as just.
No, they're definitely not. Billy Gates said 2 years ago that every man, woman, child on the planet need to swap over to a plant-based, genetically modified proteins. And I just went, interesting comment. Yeah, and of course, most of them are genetically modified soy and genetically modified canola. So those processed, there's nothing in them that's good for us. Like it has a really long history of creating ill health in our body.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. So that's sort of a shame. And hopefully the people who are doing it are looking after their health, but sometimes they're doing it for the planet. Sometimes they're doing it for all sorts of reasons. So it might be for the animals, it might be for the health, it might be for the planet, but it's sort of it might be spiritual, so you sort of have to meet people where they're at and, sort of, yeah, absolutely. So that's a bit exciting, getting the liquid range. And it is funny, isn't it? Because just because you don't want to do it doesn't mean other people don't want to do it. It's not about you.
Listen to the customers.
Listen to the customers, absolutely. And some people just can't swallow supplements.
No. Yeah.
And that's often one of those first questions I ask. What won't you do? Will you do horrible tasting herbal mixtures? Will you do powders? Will you do drops? What will you do? Yeah. And some people just want to swallow 8 capsules morning and night, and they'd rather do that every day for the rest of their lives than ever take anything that tastes bad.
Yeah. And that's part of the challenge with the liquids too, is I don't want to add sugar. So coming up with flavors that are actually mostly tenable. It looks like we're going to stick around the berries. You can flavor things with berries that don't have sugar. And so.
Yeah. Okay. With some stevia or xylitol or something? Or you're trying to avoid those as well?
Trying to avoid as much as I can. So, it's not easy. The magnesium glycinate, I think I'm going to do that as a peppermint, just because, it's typically more at night. Peppermint's kind of soothing. So, and that's got a little bit of a stronger profile. So,
okay.
Anyway, it's a journey for sure. So
it is a journey, definitely. No, well done. And how long ago did you start this range?
So I've been at this for years and years and years. But I wrote the first book about 3 years ago, and then I started the supplement company about 1.5 years ago. So
right. So where do people find you, and how do they contact you for your supplements and your books and things?
Oh yeah, thank you. So we're on Amazon, we're on Walmart, Kroger, Giant Eagle, and then of course the website is www.hello.health, or www.gethellohealth.com.
Awesome. Well, good luck with your upcoming book. That's so amazing. I can totally understand why you wanted to write that, because he's the reason for your journey.
Yeah, and I really wanted to get updated doctors and research and really, build it out even more than it was. So I'm excited about, at first it was pretty tough to find practitioners that wanted to contribute, A, because I was fairly new at all this, and B, it was still, doctors get a hard rap for, going outside of the particular norms. And so thankfully there's more and more acceptance now, even within practitioners, to be open-minded, which is fantastic. So
are there many functional medicine doctors in the States? We've lost most of ours due to the mandates, actually, in the last year or year and a half.
Yeah, they are growing. And so, it's of course easier to find them in cities instead of in suburban areas, but it's getting easier, thankfully.
Okay, good. Yeah. I often go to a 3-day congress every year, and there's nearly always functional medicine practice from the States coming over. And the thing that I always like about the States is that because you're such a huge population, when you put together data from the States, it's just so good. We're such a small population, it's quite, it's just different. So when people put together data, it just looks good. I don't know, but it's always interesting and fun hearing from them.
Yeah, and for folks that want to order from us in Australia, I would suggest doing the contact us, and I can work with you on making sure that the shipping is the cheapest as it gets, and there's no markups on that. And because sometimes shipping can get kind of expensive, but we can spend a little bit of time on it and make sure we got the right and cheapest.
That's fantastic. Any final thoughts for people?
Oh, just always ask why and continue finding the root. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to be a little vulnerable as you're trying to understand your own health and wellness. It's hard and it's scary. So
it is. And sometimes you just have to say, what's the answer? There must be an answer. Yeah, beautiful. Exactly. Thank you so much for providing solutions to so many people.